Okay, so hi everyone. Maybe we can start with a quick announcement about the project proposals, huh?
Yeah. So we're working on those, and we're going to Shadi and I will respond to and give feedback on your proposals. We're going to start with the people who met with us with the goal of finishing them by a week from yesterday, so Tuesday next week.
Yeah.
And if you didn't meet with us, you kind of come at the end of the queue. And we'll have less probably feedback because we won't have done that first stage, but that's our goal, to get back to you to look at this as a collaborative work in process.
Yeah. And based on this feedback, you should, start working on your project. Don't leave it till the last minute, please. So, the next submission, we haven't even decided on the deadline yet, the final report, final paper. We'll definitely set this as we go. But please, immediately start working on your project so that you
and feel free to come back to us when you're going along if you have more questions. Also, feel free to think of the TAs as resources too.
Absolutely.
We have a philosophy graduate student and a computer science graduate student, Mark and Sarah, and feel free to hit them up. They're going to have ideas to help you. So, just we're all stuck in our rooms doing this through WebEx, but make it as much as you can like the conversation you'd have in class to work through ideas, okay?
Yeah. So will it be around the end of the class or during the finals period? We haven't decided yet, but I think we could do it. We could we could decide on this as we go. What do you think, Hans? Do you have a preference?
Well, students, what do you prefer? I mean, we're flexible. What's better for you guys? Would you rather have it at the end of class so then you get it out of the way and then you focus on your sit-down finals, or would you rather have more time? Either talk or write it in chat, please.
That's a question for you. Can you hear us well or no?
More time. Says he'd like more time.
More
time, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, but we have to do it some, few days before the semester officially ends, because we have to, put the grades. And...
Yeah, we have. Yeah. So let's say, let me take a quick look at the schedule. Okay, exams are the 8th through the 19th. So let's put it in the middle of there. Let's say what's the Monday? Monday, the 14th.
14th of December, right?
Monday, the 14th of December, yeah.
That's what, the last day of December?
No. The last day of exams is the 19th.
Okay.
And then we have 3 days after that to finish up the grading. So this gives us like a week.
Yeah. Was that okay with everyone?
We're proposing Monday, December 14th is the deadline for your project.
Okay, great.
All right.
Sure, we'll confirm that. We'll put, a link for the submission with the due date so that you can actually see it on. Okay, good. Very good.
And the other thing we were going to do, we have some more substantive stuff to talk about, but we were going to go through 2 things that were just clarificatory because we thought they might not have been as clear as they could have been. One is, like so many American writers, Kathy O'Neill assumes everybody understands baseball, and it turns out very few people outside of Cuba, Japan, and the United States understand baseball. So just to see the statistical things she was talking about, I need to do a share screen. Share.
I need to stop sharing my screen
Okay.
first. Let me stop. Was I sharing my screen? No, I wasn't, right? So you can, I think you can.
Host disabled, attending share, okay.
Yeah,
So
here you go. Now?
okay,
Great.
so I do my desktop
Yeah, just
and I want this. Get bigger, please. Okay, this is a typical baseball defensive setup.
Mm.
Number one is the pitcher. He or she throws the ball to number two, the catcher. And then these guys are arrayed to try to stop the ball from getting to landing on the ground after it's been hit. 3 is your first baseman, 4 is your second baseman, 5 is your third baseman, and 6 is called a shortstop. He just fills the other spot that the second baseman would fill. And then 7 is your left fielder, 8 is your right fielder, 9 is your left fielder. Now, Ted Williams was one of the greatest left-handed batters ever. He would stand here. And because you hit with more power, if you swung around through to the front, he hits the ball over here almost all the time. And so what Lou Boudreau, who was the coach of the manager, they call it, of the Cleveland Indians did was he moved his defense like this. And it freaked people out. No one had ever seen it. So he just pulled everybody off of this side of the field and moved his defense here. So if you hit a ground ball in there, these infielders are going to get it and the outfielders are going to catch the fly balls. And you'd think if you're really a good hitter, why can't you just hit it over here? Williams was also very arrogant and said, I'm not going to change the way I swing. I have the best swing in baseball. And they shut him down. He really, unless he hit a home run and just hit it over them, they got him out. And because when you try to hit the ball out of you hit a home run, you tend to hit it up. He mostly hit fly balls to get out. And they shut down the best hitter in the history of the game, probably. And so the idea is this is just an example of statistical modeling where they picked up a pattern and adjusted what they were doing to reflect it. And it was the first time it had been done in this game. And now it is true if you watch baseball, which again, most people don't, but they even know what hitters tend to do, like if there's 2 strikes in the 3rd inning and they have all this data and they move the defense around. And it's actually quite interesting. And it's one of the things that baseball fans who tend to be statistical nerds nerd out on. So anyway, that was the point of her talking about that baseball example going back to the 1940s. That was just a clarificatory point in case it was mysterious what she was saying about baseball. So that's that.
So to comment on this, I think so. This is heavily used now in all sorts of sports. So I know in tennis and basketball, right? Basically, they use these data analysis tools to kind of analyze a large set of videos of previous games and kind of help the coaches develop strategies. So it's not just for baseball, it's actually used in a lot of other.
Yeah, when you hear football commentators talk, there's this category now of expected goals.
Yeah.
And so you'll compare expected goals to actual goals. So if they say if you get to a particular position with the ball with no defender between you and the goalie, 70% of the time somebody scores in that situation. Mm-hmm. And if you get less than, and if your team starts getting less than 70%, they say, well, then there's a problem. Your guys are not good enough finishers. Yeah. So you need to trade for better finishers because you had, it's called X over, I forget. They have a formula for the ratio of actual goals to expected goals. That really confused me at first. I couldn't figure out what the heck an expected goal was. So statistics are everywhere.
So the second point we wanted to make, it's actually emerged from a discussion I had with Hans when we were discussing the readings and your reflections. And we kind of had different understandings of the same text. So I'm gonna show you the text that we're talking about and then tell you what I understood from it first and what Hans understood and why we're discussing it. So in this article about the gaydar, this Stanford work, which detects sexuality based on images of faces, they were arguing about the goal of this, whether it's something ethical or not, and they talked a little bit about how they did the study, etc. And there were a lot of concerns about it. But one part that is mentioned in the article is this. So it says the following. There is this, can you, I need to share screen, I'm sorry. Okay, so share and admit Giorgio. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So there is this section where the guy says the following. There's also the issue of false positive, which causes some prediction models to be problematic when it comes at identifying a minority group. Yeah, so this is a psychologist was mentioning this as a comment about the work. So in the work by Stanford, they claim to have got an accuracy of 91%, which is huge. Yeah, like 91%. You're 91% of the time correct when it comes to identifying sexuality from an image of a face. Yeah, that's really significant. And he's arguing that this is not entirely true, or that this should be taken with a grain of salt. So you should not take it that absolute. In what way? He's saying that whenever you have a problem like this, a classification problem, and you have you try to classify an item, whether it's positive or negative, then you have one of these two classes is a minority class. So in the real world, the number is small. So he's giving this example. He's saying, let's assume you're going to test the system, which is 91% accurate on 1,000 people. Statistically speaking, the number of homosexuals or gay people is much less than straight people or heterosexuals. So he's saying, okay, let's assume you're going to test the system that the Stanford people developed on 1,000 people, and let's assume that 5% of the population is gay. So 5% of these 1,000 would be gay, and the rest would be straight. Yeah. So basically, 5% of 1,000 is 50. Okay. So we have 50 actual gay people, and the 950 are straight. Now, if you're using a system which is 91% accurate, that's going to do, meaning what? It's going to make mistakes 9% of the time. Yeah. So it's going to just make 9% of the time mistakes. Let me just admit Nabila. For some reason, it's not working. Okay. So back to this example. Yeah. So I'm going to start annotating and try to explain his point. Why this is an issue if you have one class that is in reality much smaller than the other. Okay. So let's assume I have I do a 9% error on the 50 people. So the true people that are gay, 91% of them I will be able to correctly identify, and 9% I will make mistakes. So 9% out of 50 is really nothing but, right? 5. So 5 people, approximately 5 people. What does this mean? It means that 5, gay people will be mistakenly labeled as straight by the system because it's 91% accurate. Yeah. The same applies for the straight people. So 9% times, I have in my data set 950 straight people. So I'll make around that would be 85, approximately 85. That means what? That 85 straight people will be labeled as gay. Okay, great. So that's really the errors I'm making. 5 from the side of straight, from gay labeled as straight, and 85 straight people mislabeled as gay. Okay. So now his point is the following, right? Since the number of gay people is much smaller, that's actually problematic. That's a huge problem when it comes to the mistakes you make on gay people. Yeah. So he's saying the following. He's saying that out of the 130 people that you're going to identify as gay, why do I have 130 people that I'm going to identify as gay? So I'm going to draw something called the confusion matrix, which is something we haven't used in machine learning. Okay?
Sorry, the label is called confusion matrix?
Confusion matrix, yeah. So what is the confusion matrix, right? So I'm going to say here G to refer to, right, gay people, and S to refer to straight, and G and S. Okay. So let's see what does this confusion matrix. It has you here, right? What I'm predicting, and these are the actual labels. So how many, right? How many straight people did I label as gay by mistake? Based on my formula, it's 5. Right? So I had 5 straight people that I, sorry, five gay people that I labeled as straight. So that's 5, yeah? So I'm doing here the true label, and here's what I'm predicting. How many straight people did I label as straight out of the 1,000? It's 865, yeah? I had 950, and I made mistake of 85. What's remaining is 865, yeah? Because I had 950 straight people, I made just mistake on 85 of them. How many true gay people that I labeled as gay? These were, 45. I correctly got these 45. And here I made a mistake of 85. Straight guys that I labeled, or girls that I labeled as gay. Okay, so if you sum these should be 950, and if you sum these should be 50. Okay, and that's called the confusion matrix. This guy, this cell here, is called true positive. Right? Assuming that the positive here is the gay group. Yeah. So here's I managed to do right true positives 45. Detect 45 out of the 50 correct. This is called true negative. Okay. This is the false negatives, the 5 that I missed, right? I should have predicted as positive, and I predicted them as negative. And these are the false positives. And these are the negative cases, straight, that I predicted as okay. Now I think the following, right? The last thing is saying is that you have how many you predicted in total as gay? You predicted 85 plus 45, the true positive plus the false positive. That's around 130. And out of these guys, out of these 130, you have 85 that are actually straight. Yeah. Versus if you look at the other case, right, you had only 5 people out of 870 that you made a mistake on. So the error is much more expensive for the minority class. Yeah. So this is really what his point is. That right? You can't just say my system is accurate 91% without looking at who you care about. As another example, you could imagine this is, you're studying cancer patients. You have data about people and you're saying, okay, these are, whether they would have cancer or not. It would be much more expensive to make a mistake, on patients, to, label a patient that is actually have a cancer, mistake it as somebody who's healthy versus the other way around. Yeah, so that tells you that false positives in a certain scenario, certain application, typically when you have a minority class, is much more expensive and should be, given much more weight than for false negatives. Yeah, so we really cannot use accuracy as a measure. They should report what is called F measure, right? That's much better, or recall of the positive class. Yeah, so there are other metrics which actually take this into consideration. And if you look at this metric, it might be much lower than what they report. So the F measure is one of them, which combines this, these 4 values to kind of give you an indication of how the system is doing. So be careful about the accuracies because they are a little bit inflated. Yeah, that's the point he's trying to make.
Yeah, that's really interesting. As I said, the reason I started this conversation with you last time is I could tell that there was something in there and I just couldn't follow the math. And this is very helpful, this confusion matrix. And I love that label, by the way, confusion matrix is a good thing. But so one way to do this more intuitively, or just to raise the point, would be to say, look, if you take the study and say, of the people who would identified as homosexual, what do you see there? And you see that, in fact, if you look at that class, the statistics don't look so good. It's thinking from that perspective, it's getting it wrong more often than it's getting it right. In that it's identified 85 straight people as gay and 45 straight gay people as gay, which is weird. And that 91% can hide all that. So
exactly. Yeah.
Now there were a lot of strong reactions to this in the reflections that I read. And I know some people were saying, are there any ethics boards that academics set up to sort of not grant permission for these studies? So I just want to hear some of you guys' take on this. Why did people find this study so problematic, and why did some people say it should never have been done? We just want to hear what people were thinking about this study, either by saying it.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm also curious. I'm also curious that some people just did not, kind of decided not to mention it at all. So I thought that was interesting too. Yeah. Okay. So what the people who think it's problematic? Can you tell us?
I think what I found problematic with it, I couldn't really find a beneficial purpose for it, other than harming, like people of different sexual orientation, where it's like legal, being homosexual in another country. No, it's just gonna cause harm to them, really.
Yeah. So maybe it could be used for marketing. It could be, it could be used for personalization. So, you could imagine, provide you with certain recommendations that, kind of, like there could be some market reasons for it. So it's not necessarily that it's going to be used to, identify your sexuality and then used by police, for instance, in a country where homosexuality is illegal or is banned. So I'm just trying to give you some examples of how this could be used. But Cynthia think that is bad. Okay. Yeah.
Why, Cynthia?
I think even with marketing, it's bad because you're kind of putting queer people in this one category, right? So like this product, okay, it's like for queer people only. Like there are different kinds of queer people, and queer people come in all shapes and colors and sizes, and just it's very like the physiognomy reading we did. To me, this is like as bad. Like it's that kind of, I don't know exactly how to articulate it, but you're just kind of putting people. It's reinforcing stereotypes, and it's reinforcing certain things I think we should let go of by now. Like I don't see how it can be good to anything.
I'll actually share with you the paper. I was going through it, the original paper, and you see what you're saying is actually very, very true. I want to show you, for instance, just part of, if you allow me, Hans, I'm sorry I'm taking too much time, but I thought this was fascinating, right? And it covers.
No, it's absolutely fine. This is what we're here for.
Yeah. So it covers what Cynthia was just saying. So I think this part was, I thought was very problematic in the study. Where is it? Facial femininity. Yeah. So they have done at the side, we measure facial femininity, like how feminine is the face, right? Okay. The results show that the face of gay men were more feminine and the faces of lesbian were more masculine than those of their respective heterosexual counterparts. Yeah, so I think that's what Cynthia was saying to an extent, right? So it really enforces a lot of stereotypes. Yeah. Okay. If you're interested in the paper, it has a lot of these statements that are actually very disturbing.
Now, Khalil says if the researchers were applied this to the entire population, I think the accuracy would plummet. That's interesting. Do people remember where they got the images from?
It was dating apps, no?
Yeah, dating apps. So that's gonna, I think it would slant younger. Not always. Certainly, people become widows and widowers, and people date later in life. But it is, as a whole, it probably slants younger. And what else might be going on in the kind of pictures people choose to put up on their own dating site that might be, well, that might be interesting or important when thinking about our data set. Dating apps where images are obviously going to be taken in certain ways. Okay, don't be shy. We're all adults here. Talk about what's the certain ways. Anybody? We don't need to just.
Zach, I have a point though. It's a bit uh, not different, but it's another
Go ahead.
angle to look at it.
Go ahead.
So the thing is, I'm looking at these and I'm looking at these accuracies and I'm looking at these what you identify with in terms of identities. And I think that would influence a lot of people to be segregated into further identities, whether they truly identify with as a particular moment in time or not, especially when it comes to younger generations as they look at these classifications. So it could be a sexuality, it could be a political preference, it could be whether you eat meat or a vegan or a vegetarian, any of those questions that we identify with at a given moment in time, or actually at the entirety of our lives. But as we've seen, the concept of identity has been a changing concept and more of an evolving concept. And I feel these classification problems more gets us fixated into or tendencies to make us fixated into one particular group as a purpose. And from this, I take a reflection on the impact of that on our minds and our consciousness to present.
That's good. That's good. One of the most important things about trying to be reflective about research is the kinds of questions you ask are going to partially determine the answers you get. There's making a certain assumption, right? That there's two categories of people in the world. Well, but it's also assuming that lesbian and gay male are the two. So it's assuming there's two genders. And remember, we talk about the difference between gender and sex, where gender is a social construct and sex is a biological one. It's assuming there's two genders and that there's two identifications within that. And those are substantial. Those are non-trivial assumptions. Those are substantial assumptions from the get-go. So, and it's not accidental then, this thing that Shadi just drew our attention to, that those two are running into each other. Okay, we've got male and female, and we're going to sort of cross or interpose that on the gay straight. And so, okay, so our one category male is associated more with one, whether it's female homosexual or female goes to male. So it's our two binary categories are kind of becoming parasitic on each other. Yeah, that's really good. And this was done a while ago, I think, right? What year was this study done at Stanford? Do you remember exactly?
I don't recall, but let me see if it's written here in the paper. But please, continue with the comments until I check it out. If you have any other comments.
Yeah.
2017. So it's in the American.
So it's very recent. It's very recent. Okay, so maybe a little bit before some of this more recent discussion about transgender and those issues. But what was the other thing I wanted to pick out from what you said? So there's also the stereotypes. Stereotypes are not always things that are imposed on an out group by the in group, right? It's not always something that's imposed on the minority from the majority. Yeah. There may be certain ways that when people think, if a man's thinking about how should I put up a picture that women will find attractive versus how should I put up a picture that men will find attractive, there may be some internalized stereotypes going on there where you have selection patterns. Same way, other way around. A woman might make a different choice if she's trying to pick out a picture that she thinks will be attractive to men versus a picture she thinks will be attractive to women. So it gets, given that these come from dating sites, there's all kinds of interesting other things that could come up. Now, what about, so we've heard the issue that people say, well, look, in some countries, homosexuality is illegal, and this could be really dangerous if it was used for those sorts of law enforcement purposes. And we've heard people say that it could reinforce or rigidify categories that are social constructions, not maybe real. What other concerns did people have? Is that sort of the gist of it, or is there more?
What
Okay.
other concerns you have? Like, I mean, are there any other concerns that you have about the study? Something that bothered you other than what has been said, right, Hans?
Yes, that's the question. I asked this just because there were so many negative responses, or not negative. So many people expressed concerns about it in the reflections that I wanted to hear more about what people thought was problematic, worrisome.
I'm kind of confused about why these programs are being developed. Like, I don't know, what's the point? What's the benefits? Where will they be used?
Now that's interesting. The article had a discussion about what the study designer was trying to accomplish with it. Do people remember what that was about? Why was the study done? From the,
To show how easy it is to use like facial recognition software to create these algorithms or models.
yeah, and as Miguel says in chat, to show the privacy risks. He thought this is something that philosophers call a reductio ad absurdum. He thought this would look so clearly like a way to invade people's privacy and get information about them that they wouldn't necessarily want to be public, that it would immediately tell people, would immediately tell the research community that we shouldn't be using facial recognition for these kinds of things. And it kind of backfired on him, right? Everybody got up in arms and his fellow academics said, "You homophobic monster." And he was like, "No, it's not what I was trying to do." So it's kind of interesting how quickly that can happen in communities where people are trying to be politically sensitive. I don't remember this for sure, but I think the study guy actually is a homosexual. And so that was part of his point.
I don't think so. I think maybe one of them, but yeah. could be
That's
one.
another guy who was commenting on it, saying we shouldn't be afraid of this sort of information. Yeah. Okay, you're right.
So yeah, I think, I mean, two things, right? So yes, it's about, showing policy risks and how these can be misused. So it's trying to, raise an alarm. If you look at his homepage and see, he does a lot of these studies. So he does, what is really, I mean, what are we revealing about ourselves online in general? That's really his main area of research. So, he looks at
but
and try to see, what can we tell about you from your, breadcrumbs that you leave on the web, or on the social media. Yes, go ahead.
But here's what's interesting about this fact is that when it comes to programming and building software and building machine learning algorithms and what have we, it's a very it becomes a very accessible kind of technology and become very accessible for people to do. It could be a spare time project that you think it would be fun to create, whether you're in a basement or whether you're in a university or whether you're in a big company. It doesn't require a lot of resources except your own know-how into coming into building this kind of stuff. So building these kind of software, whether they're going to be used heavily or not, it becomes a matter of a person's own choice. And this is one of the issues that we debate in this class, I think, the ethicality of such software.
Yeah. So yeah. The other thing, I think, so people attack them a lot because of, ethical, dilemmas and ethical concerns. But also in the methodology. So they, pointed out a lot of things that were actually not very, accurate. One of them is looking at this reported accuracy and claiming that, the system is working perfectly when it's not. Some people tested, his model on different types of data and actually showed that the accuracy is much lower. So there was also a lot of attacks on actually the methodology of the work itself. Yeah. I think that's pretty much all.
Okay.
I want to get back to, maybe I'll get back to this paper later on again to just show you one small thing later. Yeah.
You don't want to do it now while we're still
I
on it?
want to do it after the poll because I think this would be interesting to link it back to the poll. Yeah. So.
Okay. Should we do the poll now, or should we do the one of the points from Kathy O'Neill's article?
Maybe we do the poll now, show them quickly what I'm
Okay.
saying, wrap this up and move to the weapons of mass destruction, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, great. So now we're gonna ask you to take a poll on Zoom. Let me see if that would work. Okay, so polling, and then I say this one. Next one. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
So there were two things, and why that led to this, to us, putting this poll. So I think there is two points of views. One is saying that data should be representative of the real world, so we should not really, assume that the world is perfect and train the machine learning models based on perfect data. And the other school of thought is going to say, no, you really should be fair and try to use balanced data, make sure that everybody is represented equally, so that your model learns, not to discriminate against a particular group. And what we're asking you is which side you think is more accurate, or which one you agree with more.
People are saying this is difficult to answer. So, but it's a vote. Think about it a little bit and make your choice. The way somebody put this in the reflections was somebody said, yeah, I think we should have all pictures of construction sites be 50% female and 50% male. And someone else said, no, well, no, that doesn't work so well, because your training for medical diagnosis will start to consider the possibilities of the sorts of injuries people get and things. So think about it and vote. Should our data set try to be fair?
Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Daniel. Well, that's an important point too. If you think your answer would change given different context, maybe articulate that.
Yeah. So we have a tie. Has everybody taken the
What's your numbers so far?
50-50, 11 and 11?
Is that how many people we have involved? Did the TAs vote?
How many are we participants?
I voted.
We have one person who hasn't voted, maybe. Okay, maybe yeah. Now we're good. Now everybody's there except for me. I don't know. Hans, Sarah, and Mark. Did you participate?
Yes, I voted.
Okay.
So we 50-50 pretty much.
Yeah, it's now going to more towards the thing. I think we can stop now. I mean, we have most of the people and just show the results. Is that okay?
Marilyn says, I agree partly with both, but I'm confused. I think a lot of us feel that way.
Okay, so let's see the results. Yeah, let's do it. Share results. I'm going to share the results with you. Can you see them?
Yes.
Okay, so you have a slightly, balanced one by a small margin.
So somebody suggested, yeah, that's it. As Reem says, balance would be fair, but representative would be more accurate. That's what representative means. Yeah, Khalil said couldn't balance be used in order to push for a generation in a new generation in a sense. I'm not sure. Yeah, it is. This is a slightly different issue, but I think you'll see how it's connected. And I'm sorry to keep going back to American research, but that's where a lot of the data is. So it's another example from America. One of the most, and social psychologists tracked it, two of the most important cultural events for changing white Americans' attitudes. Well, in each, you'll see there's two different majority and minority relationships here. Two of the most important cultural developments in the US for changing people's attitudes about minority groups was the Cosby Show in the 80s, when I was in like junior high and high school, which had a middle-class Black family with a physician father and a lawyer mom, and they lived a middle-class life and all spoke good English and all these things. And the other one was that show Will and Grace from the 90s, which was a straight woman and a gay man who lived together as roommates, that just that exposure on a weekly basis to sitcom characters that you kind of related to for young people just humanized a set of people. And it's very strange. As philosophers, we always find it depressing that you don't change people's attitudes through rational arguments. You change them through association and immersion and so the idea here would be, do we need to Will and Grace and Cosby Show are data sets that we teach these machines with so that they're less likely to, I don't know, that I'm speaking about it inarticulately, but that's the idea. And I think you guys have put your fingers on the pressure points, right? You're gonna, maybe the machines would be naive. I think it's important to show that the world could be what the world could be instead of just re-representing imperfections in the real world. Okay, Jad, interesting. So what kind of imperfections do you have in mind?
Now, I think both could. I think Daniel said, it really depends on the situation. Maybe like if we're trying to develop an algorithm based on criminal, I think it would be just bad if we just use the previous data. If we use more balanced data of the criminal, I know it's not realistic, right? But what we're trying to do is be better, maybe like Khalil said, for the new generation and stuff. So wouldn't that be better to represent something represent what the world could be in a good way, you know, in the future, instead of just saying, right, this is it, can't do anything about it. Can show maybe how it can be.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even advertisement, if we're advertising construction, I mean, why not? Why wouldn't we balance it out?
Sure. This is a point that was addressed. Maybe we could balance the results only slightly, so we stay in the middle until we bridge the gap. So, you know, this is there are some places where this is done full stop. Is it France? In France, they parties must nominate 40% of their candidates have to be female when you run. If you're under that number, you get disqualified as a party, right? So it doesn't say you have to have the legislature like X, but it says you have to create these opportunities. It can be done top down like that. But this was brought up very centrally by that Australian woman who you saw give the talk at NYU and the recording. She raised an issue of, this is why I was asking Jad about what kind of imperfections he had in mind. She raised the issue about how, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. How do you pick the quote unquote perfect world that you're aiming for, right? What is, well, I think it's clear what the complications are. Is it correct that we think the workforce should be, say, completely gender balanced, and we should put an end to an idea that mothers spend more time with the kids right after they're born? Maybe. But it's not obvious that that's something you want to, you think would be an overall social good. So that's a complication too. Okay, good. I think
yeah.
I think that
one more thing. I think there is also this point of the following, right? If you do not fix, you know, an issue with bias, it will keep increasing, because these systems, like I think one example is when it's used in criminal justice, because these systems are actually applied and used. Now more Black people will be convicted and arrested, and that will affect even the results more. So the bias keeps increasing because you're using it. So there are certain scenarios where you definitely have to fix it, and I think, I mean, from what I've heard of you and from these, different points of views, I feel like yes, its application dependent, but you really need to think about it. It's a matter of did you consider it or not, right? It's not a matter of just you're taking one side, yeah. So maybe
No, I think that point is well taken. That point is well taken. When this kind of when we're not talking about marketing and things, and when we're talking about very high stakes things like criminal justice. Another case that what your comment just reminded me of was in some of this medical diagnosing software. There was a case in the U.S. Sorry, Native American communities. There's a historical problem with alcoholism in those communities because the alcohol came into the community in like the 18th and 19th century, and there wasn't a historic kind of, for lack of a better word, weeding out of people who were particularly vulnerable to that toxin. Yeah. So there are a lot of alcoholics in the community. And there was, but even given that there's higher than normal, the diagnosing software had picked up this association between Native Americans and alcoholism and was giving a large number of mistaken diagnoses of cirrhosis when people came in with liver problems. Basically, if you were Native American and you had a liver issue, they said, oh, it's got to be cirrhosis from drinking. And that led to very, just like criminal justice, if people have a problem, maybe it's liver cancer and it doesn't get treated, and then you're dead. So yeah, absolutely. There are specific cases where we can identify specific harms where you think this data set needs to be tweaked to avoid perpetuating longer and more frequent incarcerations among Group X or basing the wrong kind of assumptions on that. Good. That's a really good example.
To wrap this up, maybe I'd like to show you the GADAR study again, right? They were very careful about this actually to an extent. So this is their data. I'm going to show you this table. Can you see the table that I'm sharing right now? Yes. They were very accurate to have exactly almost equal number of males versus females, and the data set was perfectly balanced. Yeah, almost the same number of gay people as heterosexual. Almost the same number of lesbians versus gays. They're really very careful about having a perfectly balanced data set to avoid any issues with saying, okay, your data set is imbalanced. You're biased to an extent. So they're really careful about that. And so they took the first approach, which is really looking, or the second approach was looking at balanced data. Yeah, just wanted to make this point clear.
Balanced in
the training data. It's in the sense, right, that you have the exact number of, for each class, you have exactly the same number. So instances, and also not only because the issue is not balancing the number of examples per class, it's also balancing the type of data that you have. So they really had the number of males versus females and so on. So you really look.
And so that point that the guy raised, the person raised about false positives when you have a minority group being much smaller, that was sort of a theoretical problem.
No, it's actually true. So it's a difference between the training data, balancing the training data, and the issue is that at the end of the day, the system is going to be more accurate towards or the mistakes that it's going to make is going to be much more expensive because the number of homosexuals is much smaller than the number of heterosexuals. Yeah. So it's
if you ever applied this in the real world, that problem would rise up. It's not about how they did the study; it's about how. Daniel wants to say something. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, I just want to ask if it exists. So about like bias, and so for instance, if an algorithm goes through a set of data and sort of like segregates and see, and we notice that there's like 5% of bias. So is there maybe, is it possible? I think this is more technical than just like, this is more than theoretical. It's like, does it help to take that wrong data or that wrong information and feed it back to the system and say, oh, you made this mistake, sort of like relearning and seeing how it might.
Does
that exist already?
It's called meta classification or ensemble learning. Yeah, so there's a technique which actually kind of builds multiple classifiers, and you know, you look at the mistakes the classifier is making, and you try to focus on it. So there is a lot of work on this, and there are already models that can do this. Yeah, but good point, Dan. Yeah. Okay.
And that's one of the points that Kathy O'Neill was making, that Google and Facebook know how to do this, and that is because they have the best engineers and the biggest data sets, and that information is not really getting to the people who are doing the bank loan assessments and the credit card applications. They aren't fixing for mistakes in the way that the people who are doing it in the other contexts are. Okay. I'm trying to decide which thing to do next. Yeah. I'm going to try the more ambitious one. I want to talk a little bit about something that came up in the conversation that maybe some of you saw between Jerzy and I in the reflection section on the webpage. I think, and one of the things Jerzy was pushing on was, he said, look, a lot of these issues are about patterns of bias that exist in society. This is ethics. This isn't particularly information technology ethics, or this isn't particularly artificial intelligence ethics. And I was trying to make the point that, well, one of the things that's sort of specific to it is when you kind of numericize, for lack of a better word, turn into quantified statements, the biases, it gets rigidified in a way that's very hard to pull back from, and it can kind of accelerate it. And that's part of Kathy O'Neill's point. And I want to give a very pedestrian and humble example of how this push for quantification happens. Can I share my screen, Shadi, now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is a fascinating document called the Philosophy Department's Annual Program Learning Outcomes Assessment Report. So when I was chair of the department, I had to fill these things out for it. Okay, so listen to these things. Students should be able to critically evaluate a range of philosophical problems and have achieved as deep and critical an engagement with those problems as is feasible in the time available. Students should have internalized the norms of critical thinking, for example, clarity, careful analysis, critical reflection, rational argument, sympathetic interpretation, understanding not only of theories and concepts, but also the assumptions which they are based, upon which they are based. And students should be able to apply any philosophical skills to other academic disciplines of personal and matters of personal and public interest. Okay, these are the three things that are the program learning outcomes for if you become a philosophy major. These are the things we're pretty sure we can guarantee you can do by the time you finish your work in our department. The administration came to us and said, okay, we need to evaluate these. And we were trying to figure out what they meant. And we said, look, we can talk to you about what the discussions we have in our exit surveys with our seniors. And we can talk to you about, we can show you examples of the writing that they've gotten published. And for lots of reasons, they were like, no, we're not interested in that. And it became pretty clear to us that what they wanted was a number. And eventually, what I came up with that seemed to satisfy them was this. First of all, you'll notice the numbers are statistically insignificant because we didn't have enough majors. So basically what I ended up having to do was I just would ask professors, given the work of this particular major in your class, and it was all anonymized. Nobody got ratted out as a student who wasn't meeting up with the standards. We said, all went anonymized and went into numbers. We told the university and the education department that was directing us to do this, and then the accreditation of officials in New York, that this shows that we're doing our job, which is basically what do you learn to do as a philosopher? You read really complicated original texts and learn to write about them critically, which is a very useful skill. But being able to write that way can turn you into a journalist, into a screenwriter, into all kinds of things, or a technical writer. but we really thought it was ridiculous to do this, but it was absolutely required. And this isn't how academic departments used to assess themselves. And you may know this, when you fill out those faculty evaluations at the end of the semester, people don't look very much at what you say about whether the teacher was good at communicating information and stuff. There's an average that comes out, and people talk about the student evaluations. Oh, that person, he gets fours. He gets fours on a student evaluation, so he's good. And what does that mean? So I just wanted to point to this larger trend in society and in how kind of ways of management and assessment have done this, to try to quantify and numerize what we do, and to make this, I'm making decisions about which departments stay around and not, or ones like these. And let me just close with one particular example I thought was particularly telling. York University in Toronto did an analysis to figure out, it was trying to figure out which sort of academic units had too few majors to be economically viable. And the statistic jumped out at everybody who looked at it. There was this one unit of the university that had this amazing ratio between amount spent per student and an amount of income coming in. And that unit was the paid parking. When you looked at all the functions of the university, the most efficient thing, because you didn't spend anything on the students because you don't have to teach them, but the significant amount of money was coming into the university from people putting money in parking meters. So just that's a little bit silly, but it came up in several administrative meetings at York University. So what are these guys doing over there? What's that one? Because it was presented as a graph, and they if you didn't look at the labels, you're like, how come those guys are doing so good? So that is the nightmare scenario of where this could lead. I guess I don't have too much more to say about that. I just wanted to point it out as a worry. What do you think? Am I being paranoid, or are these things to be legitimate to be worried about? Anyone? Okay, close up a little bit. My argument was about how we are quantized. Right. Jersey's talking about. Jersey's talking about we essentially live in a quantified world because the genetic code directs a lot of us, and we have 4 genetic bases, and that has a lot to do with who we are. Okay, that's a kind of a deep point. Okay, that is perhaps good. Which is now 3. So I want to make one other point I thought was important from Kathy O'Neill's argument, and that's here. There's an important move in here. This is the character, and a lot of guys, you wrote about this in your reflections. This Polish American woman, Sarah Wysocki. Mm-hmm. For the most part, the programs deliver unflinching verdicts, and human beings employing them can only shrug as to say, "Hey, what can you do?" And that is precisely the response Sarah Wysocki finally got from the school district. Jason Commerce later told the Washington Post that the erasures were suggestive. You remember what this was, that teachers who came out with good scores on this, how students are improving under them, there was a good reason to believe that they were changing their students' answers on the standardized tests so that they would get better scores and the teachers would look better. And she presented that evidence, and they said, well, that's not decisive. We have all this data saying that there was improvement here, and just because it looks suspicious that the data was that's not enough. So she said, the evidence was not conclusive. He said she had been treated fairly. And here's O'Neill's main point. Do you see the paradox? An algorithm processes a slew of statistics and comes up with a probability that a certain person might be a bad hire, a risky borrower, a terrorist, or a miserable teacher. That probability is distilled into a score, which can turn someone's life upside down. And yet when a person fights back, suggestive countervailing evidence simply won't cut it. The case must be ironclad. Human victims of WMD's weapons of mass destruction will see time and again are held to a far higher standard of evidence than the algorithms themselves. So what I want to get at here is that's a suggestive claim that the people being assessed by these algorithms are being assessed on a higher standard than the mechanism, the algorithm doing the assessment. And I want to see if people have a sense for how that works. Can someone articulate for us what it means to say, or to explain what it means to say that the algorithm is being held to a lower standard than the people the algorithm is assessing?
Can I try?
Yeah, sure.
The way I looked at it is that as humans, we appeal to each other for reason giving, like logical reason giving. When we do something, we explain why we came to a certain conclusion, whereas this machine, well, no one asks how it came to a certain conclusion. The result is just accepted.
That's a nice way of putting it. The philosopher Daniel Dennett talks about what we do with other beings that we consider rational. We adopt a view to them. He calls it the intentional stance. And this means you look at it, you might do this with a pet, but you certainly do it with your brothers and sisters and your friends. You look at the thing as an individual who makes a decision and moves forward for a reason. And this was Fabiana's point, that you are entitled to say, why did you do that if somebody does something that you don't expect? And it looks like that question isn't asked of the systems that make these assessments of people, right? The guy who gets turned down for, I'm thinking of It's a Wonderful Life here. The guy who gets turned down for a mortgage can't go into his banker that he knows and says, you know, I'm trustworthy. Why did I get turned down? They're like, no, look, man, the decision's been made. You're too high risk. That's it. So I think that's a really good way of putting it, Fabian. And it's different than the way I had thought about, but I think you're really gotten your finger on something important there. Does anyone else want to comment on that or take a crack at explaining this asymmetry between the way these things are assessed or the standards they're held to?
Any thoughts? Any other? Do you agree with Fabiana, for instance? Do you have a different understanding of the statement?
Maybe Fabiana did too good a job.
Yeah.
People are afraid their answer won't stand up to scrutiny. That was really good. Thank you. Those are the points I wanted to bring up for today's lesson. Shadi, do you have anything else you want to?
I also don't have anything planned.
Okay, that's fine. It's
10 minutes earlier. Hooray!
It's fine. Everybody's tired from midterms and everything. We can knock off a bit early. So.
Yeah, just so I want to say, I mean, so far I'm very happy with your your discussions, and we're really enjoying. Me and Hans are really enjoying your inputs and your summaries and reflections. It's very, very interesting so far. Yeah, so
yeah, I have to say, teaching this semester is kind of a slog because of all this online stuff, but I really do look forward to this class every week. You guys are really doing a good job of making our jobs rewarding. Thank you.
Absolutely. Right. We'll talk to you next week. Yeah.
And again, we hope to get to you your feedback on your proposals by Tuesday.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Cheers.
Namaste.